who was in the middle of explaining a Rashi of the portion. And his finger, literally, I stood right in front of him, like you, and his finger was like this. And I'm like, OMG. I'm expecting the worst. He's basically going to say, why? Or whatever he would say. You're not allowed to tie tzitzis on Shabbos. You're not allowed to make knots on Shabbos. So it's a skillah, it's a chatas, for those who are familiar. It's not nice, it's disgusting, it's self-centered. Get out! Now, if Chabad throws you out, where do you go? If you're not Jewish enough for Chabad, where do you go, to Satmar? Into Rikarta? I mean, what's next? Like, I knew this day will come, the Rebbe will lose his patience. Even the Lubavitch Rebbe could lose his patience. But instead, he actually broke out in a smile. And he asked me the following question in Yiddish, and I say it verbatim. I could still see his glowing face and hear his saintly words. He looks at me and he says, "Von wanneer weißt du, als du da Welt?" How do you know that the universe exists? It was not a question I expected. How do you know the universe exists? What is this, a class on quantum physics? The power of observation? What are we going to deal with, subatomic particles and the uncertainty principles? How do I know the universe exists? I never thought about it. The Rebbe waited for an answer. He waited probably 15 seconds, which seemed to me like eternity. 6,000 eyes were directed at me. I turned white and pale and blue and red, and all I was thinking is, Lubavitch Rebbe, live and let live. I did not disturb you in your talks. Why would you want to disturb me in my tzitzis campaign? We had a wonderful agreement going here. I was occupying time with what I like to do. You were occupying your time with what you like to do. Let's move on. But the Rebbe's eyes, his famous eyes, those blue, potent, sacred eyes, were piercing my soul. And with a smile, he was waiting for my answer. I didn't know what to answer. So after 15 or 20 seconds, the Rebbe decided to answer for me. And as though he is quoting me, he said in Yiddish, "Entweder." This child responds, how do I know the universe exists? Well, the erste Pasuk for the ganze Torah, hebt sich an, Bereshis, Bara Elikim, Es HaShamayim Eis Haaretz. Because the opening verse of the entire Hebrew Bible, the entire Torah, opens up with the base. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. That's how this young man knows that the universe exists. And he moved on to the next topic. Next Shabbos, I was afraid he was going to ask me another question. So I decided to listen. Instead of tying tzitzis, counting beams, I listened. And with my limited capacity as a child, I found it fascinating, intriguing. I became addicted, an addiction I hope I will never recover from. And today I have the privilege of traveling the world and sharing the timeless wisdom, inspiration, depth of what I was privileged to hear from my Rebbe over a decade and a half, sitting at his feet and absorbing the most exciting, relevant dimensions of Yiddishkeit in its entire tapestry, from Kabbalah to Halacha, from Bavli to Yerushalmi, from Sifri, Sifrot, Tosefta, Rambam, Rishonim, Achronim, Nigla, Musar, Machshava, Chassidus, history, psychology, science, Israel, current events, and the pulse of the Jewish people today. But as I grew up, I wondered, why did the Rebbe ask me that question? There were 6,000 people in the room. Maybe it was a brilliant pedagogical way of stopping me from tying those tzitzis. It taught me everything I have to know about communication and education being effective. Instead of telling the child how how bad he is and how he is misbehaving. Give the child a passion for which he or she can live for. And I thought to myself today, when I have the privilege of traveling the world, maybe the Rebbe was saying, never forget that your mission in this world is to know about the universe from one source, not from the New York Times, and not from CNN, and you'll forgive me, not even from Fox News. Your mission is to know about the world from the opening verse of Torah, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Look at the world from the divine perspective, and remember the world has a creator. And it's really what I try, at least sometimes, to convey in one form or another. And it reminds me when Golda Meir, the Prime Minister of Israel, became the Prime Minister of Israel, she penned a letter to Henry Kissinger, the American Secretary of State. Today he's in his 90s, living in Manhattan, a German Jew. And she wrote to Kissinger, at last, Israel has a real friend in the White House. A Jewish Secretary of State. I look forward to a wonderful relationship between our two great countries. Henry Kissinger wrote back, Mrs. Meir, let me state my priorities clearly so there's no misunderstanding. Number one, I am an American citizen. Number two, I am Secretary of State of the U.S., not of Israel. Number three, I happen to be Jewish. And it's number three. Golda Meir was a wise woman, and she wrote back, that's exactly why I look forward to the best working relationship. Because here in Israel, we read from right to left. So, my dearest friends, you know, Moshe Weiss, you know Moshe Weiss? Moshe Weiss was a Jew from the shtetl, what your parents called Agriner. He came from the other side of the Atlantic, came here to these blessed shores and wanted to become a citizen. The problem is, to become a citizen, you need to know the language, the history. Even then, he knew not a word of English. Like your Eltazade, he only spoke Yiddish. He didn't know English. So what do? He calls a friend, and the friend says, I'll set you up with a clerk who does interviews, and he always asks 5 questions. He's doing this for 45 years. You don't have to understand English. You just have to memorize 5 answers verbatim. Great. What's the first question? The first question is always, what's your name? When you hear that question, you'll just say, Moshe Weiss. You don't have to understand. Question number 2 will be, how many children do you have? And you will say 5. Question number 3, how many states are there in the U.S.? You'll say 50. His 4th question is, who was the first president of our country? You're going to say George Washington. His 5th question is always, do you have parents? When you hear number 5, you'll say, thank God both. Moshe Weiss prepares for this exam for 4 months, pacing his kitchen every day, back and forth, remembering these 5 responses. Moshe Weiss, 5 children, 50 states, George Washington, thank God both. He comes for this great interview on this truly anticipated day. And he walks in, and the old clerk says, we're going to make this fast. I don't like to kratz around and procrastinate. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. You'll answer, and we'll give you citizenship. And he nods. Question number 1. What was the name of the first president of the United States of America? And without skipping a heart's beat, he says, Moshe Weiss. Question number 2. How many states are there in the U.S.? And he says 5. Question number 3, how many children do you have? And he says 50. The old clerk looks at this Jew who had a shtreimel, a long black coat, and long pious, and he says, what's your name? He says, George Washington. The man on the other side of the desk was an Alta Yid, an old Jew. He knew exactly what's happening. He says, can you answer me one more question? Who is Meshigah in this room, you or me? The man says, thank God, both. And of course, the moral of the story is, you can memorize lines and master techniques, but if you don't get it, you just don't get it. And at some point you're going to get stuck. I think it was Helen Keller who said, the only thing that's more tragic than not having eyesight is lacking vision. A lot of people can see, but they have no vision. You remember the defense minister of Israel, Moshe Dayan. You remember Moshe Dayan, Olav Shalom? He had a patch on his eye from a wound in the 1940s. And he was once driving on an Israeli highway, Kvish Mispar Shesh, 160 kilometers per hour, which in Israel is not that fast, but it's fast. A policeman stops him and says, Moshe Dayan, you want to serve as a role model for Israeli society. You're driving like a madman. I'm going to quadruple your summons due to your position. He looks at the police officer. He says, my dear officer, look at me. I have one eye. Now, what would you like me to do with that eye? Look at the speedometer or look at the highway? Please explain it to your friend. Alice is strong. Have a heart and explain it to your friend. Now, I once told this anecdote and somebody in the crowd said, did he get a ticket? So I said, my grandmother used to say there are three types of Jews, Shlomiels, Shlomazels, and Nudniks. The Shlomiel pours the soup on the Shlomazel. The Nudnik wants to know what type of soup was it. I don't know if Moshe Dayan got a ticket, but I like his insight. I could focus my entire life at the speedometer, or I can look at the highway. We call it in Judaism chazon, vision, perspective. Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'saaretz. And it's here that I believe we can tune in to the vision of what has unfolded here in this community over the last 25 years, and what continues to unfold here, and what is being celebrated here tonight at this great dinner. Chabad of Boynton Beach. And I think the best way to encapsulate it is with that strange mitzvah, so enigmatic. Imagine you purchased the Mona Lisa by Da Vinci for $600 million. That's, I think, its price. I don't know if the Louvre wants to sell it, but it's around $600 million, okay? That's all. You want a new one? You could try, huh? If not, you can give the money to Rabbi Cement. At least 10%. Imagine you get it. Or another great Van Gogh, or Rembrandt, or Raphael, or Picasso, and of course, the piece of art comes in a special suitcase packaged, and you hang it up in your salon, or your dining room, or your living room, or your study. Do you leave the suitcase in which it came, the package in which it came, do you leave that in your dining room, in your living room, in front of the painting? Of course not. You leave it in storage. And when you're going to move one day from New York to Florida, you will take out the package and the suitcase, and you will place the piece of art in it carefully, and you will have it shipped, of course, insured. Why? Because the suitcase doesn't belong there in the living room. The suitcase belongs in the closet. The art belongs in the living room. Makes perfect sense. But there's an exception. One exception. The most priceless piece of art ever created. Because it wasn't just a regular piece of art, it was a divine piece of art, was the Aron, the Ark. It contained the tablets, the Luchot, that God brought down from Moses brought down from God, the second tablets, and the broken fragments of the first tablets, and it was placed in the Holy of Holies, in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary, and then in the temple, and it had poles called badim, staves, in order to be able to transport it from location to location as they were traveling in the desert. And the Torah says in this week's portion, Truma, Lo yasuru habadim mimenu. Never remove the poles from the ark. The poles must remain permanently fixed to the ark, even if you may remain in one place for 18 years. The poles, as a means for transportation, must remain there. And the commentators are dumbfounded. What's the purpose? Do you know that the sanctuary stood in Shiloh for 369 years? And the poles were always there. Aesthetically, it's inappropriate. The poles don't belong there. Take them out, put them away. When we have to move, we'll and carry the ark and relocate it. No. The Rambam counts it as a mitzvah loisasa with malchus. It's a serious transgression to remove the poles. Why? So in 1959, there was a large debate at McGill University between two scholars, a British historian by the name of Arnold Toynbee. The second person was a Jew named Rabbi Dr. Professor Yaakov Herzog. Dr. Herzog was a son of the second chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Yitzchok Isaac Halevi Herzog, a brother of the president of Israel, Chaim Herzog, an uncle of Buzi Yitzchok Herzog, a student of Reb Isser Zalman Meltzer, the Volozhiner student of Reb Chaim Brisker, the author of Evan Ha'ozel from Slutsk, who was the Rosh of Eitz Chaim in Jerusalem. He was his student. Professor Jacob Herzog was Israel's ambassador in Canada, and he debated Professor Toynbee in McGill in the 50s. The auditorium was packed, and one of the big issues discussed was, are Jews entitled to a homeland in the state of Israel? Toynbee did not love Jews, nor did he love Israel. If you follow his grandchildren today in Oxford, you'll see that the apples did not fall far from the tree. Toynbee argued that Judaism is a culture, it's a religion, and therefore the Jews are not entitled to a homeland because there are Australian Jews, Russian Jews, South American Jews, North American Jews, Italian Jews, French Jews. Judaism is a religion.